this is Doreen Reardon. I'm here with Vitals and Verdicts. And Tori's joined us. We're so glad to have you, Tori.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here, Doreen.
Yes. We're just going to dive on in because I have a lot of good questions for you.
Great.
So, first things first, tell me what inspired you to get into legal nursing at all? How did that all transpire?
Well, it kind of came up by accident. I was working in a skilled nursing facility as a director of nursing, and one of our corporate consultants had come in to review charts, just to do chart reviews and check on things. But she also, and we knew that when she came in, it was usually because there was some kind of a complaint or somebody wasn't happy. And so she was looking at that chart to see if there was any validity to the families or the patients' complaints. So we were sitting, her and I, as a director of nursing, we're going through charts together and just talking back and forth. And she's like, wow, you're really good at this, Tori. You should look into legal nurse consulting. And I was kind of like, what's that? So this was probably in 2015. So at least 10 years ago. And so long story short, I didn't do anything, at that point. And then a few years later is when I kind of looked into it a little. By then, this poor lady, she was super, super nice lady. She ended up passing away. So I didn't get to pick her brain anymore after that, but she did spark the interest in it, I think. So that's kind of what got me started into legal nurse consulting because I'd never heard of it before that. So that was actually what kind of sparked my interest in it.
And did you just start researching online about it and all that?
Well, so now how I actually started to get into it was then I'm like, okay, what is this? I went to Google, and the first thing that came up was a course, one of the courses that are out there, still out there, a very big, course that you can pay lots of money for. And I did. So I
bet I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I did the first course that popped up and I'll say it wasn't a bad course. But it just wasn't interactive as far as, you're just online and you're watching, back then they sent you CDs and they sent you a big book. And so I get done with the course and it was kind of like, okay, now what do I do type thing. So this was in 2017. So for another year passed, I did nothing with that education that I had gotten. And so then in 2018, I think it was one of those New Year's resolution type things. I'm like, okay, it's January. You need to do something. You spent all that money. Let's see what we can do with that education you got. So I went back to Google. And this is, again, before AI. So we couldn't go to ChatGPT. Had to do Google still. And then that's when LNC came up. So I started looking into it, realized that there was a chapter about an hour from me in Orlando, and they had a meeting the next week. And I thought, okay, this is a sign. So I got in my car, went to the chapter. This is when they still did live meetings before COVID and everything. And that really got the ball rolling. That's where I started meeting people. That's where I started connecting. And that was really the start of everything. So at that point.
Love it. And can you walk us through your career path and how you got into mentorship?
Well, that again was kind of another accident, I think, because it wasn't anything I ever had on my radar or my LNC plan, anything at all. But through LNC, I got real involved in the chapter level and then in the national levels. Let's see, this is 26. So I guess it would have been 24. I became a director at large for the national LNC. And part of the role as a director at large is to talk to people, network with people, answer questions. They call into the main office and they have a question and they field it out to the different director at larges. So I was speaking to LNCs every week, multiple people every single week about the journey and what it's like and answering questions. And it was to the point where I thought, I really enjoy this kind of talking with people and helping them get started. But there was only so much you could do in a 30-minute or 60-minute phone call, because I had to go back to work. I had to go back to my practice. I had to, So that's when I kind of got the thing, and it was really not me. It was literally my financial planner. We were talking about this volunteerism and he's like, you should make that a business. If you like doing it, why don't you make it a business? And I'm like, I don't know how to do that, So that's kind of how it started is through that interaction. And then so last year, early in the spring, I thought, okay, well, it couldn't hurt to start it. And I worked on it for several months and got my program materials all together. And then I launched it in August of last year.
And for anyone listening, Tori is a very, very accomplished LNC, now has her own official mentorship business, which by all appearances seems to be going great as well, right?
Yeah, it is. It's far exceeded any expectation, that's for sure. And I never expected to love it as much as I do. I really do enjoy the interaction with the mentees and talking them through things and listening to their worries and listening to their successes. All of that is just so much fun. Because before I did the mentorship, I mean, I had my own business. I did subcontracting. I worked for a defense firm part-time. I had my own clients. And it's pretty much, I'm going to be honest, you're sitting in front of a computer for many hours a day. And
Yeah.
it's kind of, it can be lonely sometimes. I know that sounds
Yeah.
crazy,
Yeah.
but
It's isolative.
that's part of the part that you don't hear about all the time. And so I didn't realize that I missed the interaction of being in a clinical setting or being with people or going into a work setting. So this has kind of given me that back. Every day I have Zoom calls. I have, calls with mentees or people, and I love that part. So that's really been a something I never expected. Let's put it that way.
It's awesome. I love that for you. And I still remember, probably 9 months ago or so, my very first LNC phone call was with you, and you were so helpful, and I'll always remember it. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
It's funny. I mean, I can remember, I've had hundreds of calls, I bet, in the last year or so. And I might not be able to put a face to a name because most of the time we're on a phone call, but I can remember a lot of phone calls and the first calls that I've had with people. And then I see them on LinkedIn and I'm like, oh, they're doing so good, or something like that. So it's kind of fun to listen to that and
Yeah.
watch people
Yeah, you get to
grow.
cheer people on. That's very cool. So, what do you do for your mentors as far as advising against, common mistakes? What kind of first steps do you usually encourage them to make?
Well, there's lots of things that people make mistakes on when they early on. A couple of things, I guess the first thing I could think of is, and people say this, waiting to start until you feel like you're ready. You're never going to be ready. Just like,
Mm.
you know, people say, "Oh, I'm not going to have a baby until I'm ready." Well, you're never going to be ready for that. You just have to do it. And
Yeah.
one of my mentees, she's clinically active. She's full-time in the ER and has been for years. And on our last call, she says, "Tori, guess what I did? I decided I want to do something totally different from ER. And I applied for an OR position in the same hospital that she worked." She said, "I don't know anything about OR. I'm going to try it." And she actually got the position. So she's like starting something brand new along with her legal nurse consulting. And she's just ecstatic. So sometimes you just have to do it, whether you're
Yeah.
ready or not. So that's the first thing I can think of. Second thing is, as far as if you said about common mistakes, is not knowing what your role is when you're speaking with an attorney. So you've had a conversation with an attorney. He or she wants to hire you for a merit review, an expert witness case, a chronology, whatever, IME, DME, whatever it might be. It's so important to make sure that before you hang up that phone or get off that Zoom call, that it's very clear what your role is, what they need from you, and what your deliverable is going to be, whether it's a report, when it's going to be done, and just make sure that that's all done. Because sometimes I remember getting off the phone and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did he say he wants me to do? And did he want to report or did he not want to report? So you second guess yourself. So making
Yeah.
sure that you know what it is that you're supposed to do. And also knowing what side that attorney works for, whether they're plaintiff or defense. I have
Mm.
had people have that, I've had a conversation and they said, "Oh, I had a call with an attorney." I said, "Oh, was it defense or plaintiff?" "Well, I'm not sure." I'm like, "You have to know that. That's kind of important. So there's just a lot of little things, but those are the first things that come to my mind. Because, when I think about what the attorney needs from you, whether it's a report, but they really also need is your knowledge and your education. That's the whole reason they're hiring you, is because they don't know how to read that medical record. They don't know how to spot that inconsistency. So remember that in the background, that they're hiring you for your clinical knowledge.
Yeah. And are there any particular skills from the clinical side that LNCs can take over with them that will translate well into the legal world?
Well, for me, it would have to have been being organized, because
Mm.
you have to have a structure and a plan, or else things are going to get crazy and you're going to get lost in it. I remember when I first started and I got subcontracting and then I got an expert witness case and then I got some of my own cases. Next thing you know, I had no idea who, what, where belonged to anything. I had to really stop and get some processes in place and get some, like back then I did it all through Excel. I had to make an Excel spreadsheet. This client goes with this case and I got it on this date. And, just documenting all your conversations and things like that. So
Yeah.
being organized early on will help later when you're busy. That's the first thing. But
Hmm.
also skills that you bring to the table are just your critical thinking skills. We're nurses. I mean, that's what we do. So that's again what they're hiring you for. They're hiring you for your critical thinking skills and to be able to point out things in that medical record that shouldn't be there or things that should be there that aren't there. So,
Yep.
that's the skills that you bring to the table. There's lots of other things as well, but those are the first two things that kind of come to my mind. Because remember, they're hiring you to tell them what the standard of care is for that case. So, say it's a ER case and, it's somebody came in, with chest pain. The attorney doesn't know what the standard of care is for that chest pain patient. And remember, standard of care is what a prudent nurse or provider would do in the same or similar circumstances. So, a nurse in Oklahoma and a nurse in Florida with the same patient should be doing similar things. That's what kind of a standard of care is talking about. So if one nurse does this and one nurse does that, is there a breach in the standard of care? So that's what they're looking for, is you to help them identify the breaches in the standard of care.
How important would you think it is to have the real world experience versus formal training in the
Mm.
LNC world?
Okay, good question. I think a little bit both help. Both help, both matter. You got to have that clinical world experiences. You've got to have all that clinical background. I really do believe in order to really be successful, you do have to have a few years under your belt as a
Mm,
nurse. I mean, you can't just
I agree.
graduate from nursing school and 2 years later think that you have it down packed. I do think, now I'm not saying you got to be 10 or 15 or 20, but you got to have a little bit of that clinical background. But as far as formal training, you're going to hear all over that you should take a course, you should get with a mentor. You don't need a mentor. Don't let them take your money. There's all those things that you hear out there. And I'm all about not spending money where it's not needed. Let's put it that way. I don't think you should take every single course and join everything that costs you money, because until you make money, you shouldn't be spending a lot of money, because
Mm.
there's a lot of resources out there, a lot of free resources, a lot of very, money
Reasonably
conscious,
priced. Yeah,
practical
reasonably priced, probably.
practical approaches. I mean, things like this podcast, these webinars that you can go to, all of those things, every single time you gain information. There's so many different communities. So my thought with that is you need to do everything that you can do. That's free. That's the first thing. And just take bits and pieces out of all of that education. But I do think it is helpful to have some type of formal mentorship, training, preceptorship, course, module, whatever you want to do, whether it's through AALNC, through a mentor, through another course, because you do need some baseline. You do need a little bit of baseline. Now, can you get that from a mentor or a subcontractor for free? Yes, you can. You just have to find that person. But if you
Mm.
can't and you really want the whole picture, sometimes then you do have to invest in yourself, and that might be taking a course or joining a mentorship. So I think both are very important.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And then, of course, you have the whole business aspect. What advice would you give your mentees about starting the business, trying to maintain a business? What about that piece?
Well, my first thing when I think of business, one, there's a lot of little things like, you need to have, a bank account. You need to have your office, some type of a setting set up to work from. You need to do those type of things just to set up your business. Second thing is time management. It is so important to be efficient with your time at this point, because you're still
Yep.
juggling. Most people are still juggling clinical. They're still
Mhm.
juggling a family. They're still juggling soccer practice. They're still juggling all of their outside activities. And we're going to add a business inside of it that they don't
Yeah.
know anything about, because we're nurses. We never, we weren't taught how to do a business, how to be an entrepreneur. So you do need
Mhm.
to do a little bit of homework there too, but you can. That's stuff you can learn on your own as well. But time management and making sure that you block off sections of time for marketing, for casework, for family, for your clinical time, for sleep, all that fun stuff that sometimes we should have. And then planning, goal setting and planning, because if you stop, things slow down and it's hard to get the momentum back. So, I mean, I have my vision board above my desk here that has all my little quotes, and it has things that, goal setting. Now, goal
I love it.
setting is not my strong suit. I do not have a book that has everything in it that I'm going to do for this whole quarter or this whole year. I should, and I teach that, and I encourage people to do that, but it's not my strong suit. But it does make it easier if I plan for it, because it just creates less chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. Can visualize better, I guess, right?
Yeah.
What are some early wins that LNCs could focus on?
Gosh. Well, you do need to focus on the wins. I mean, so say you just connect with 5 LNCs this week. That's a win. You know what I mean? So you
Mhm.
need to write that down in your journal, as a win. But just making this, my quote up here says, a little progress each day adds up to big results. So literally
It's true.
making baby steps every single week, adding one new connection, adding one new education, whether it's, webinar or joining a community or listening to a podcast or ordering a book and listening to that. So, and then when you do get that first case, though, I mean, as far as you need to make sure that, well, not the first case, but every case, you do 110%. You need to make sure that it's the best possible work that you can do, because those type of work and relationships that you're building will come back 10 times over. You will get referrals from that first case. And I can guarantee you, I've talked to dozens and dozens of successful LNCs that have gotten so many cases from their very first case.
Mm.
Attorneys love to refer. Okay. And so if you do a good job, they're more than happy to tell other attorneys. If you don't, obviously they're not going to. So that's your best marketing, is to
Mm.
do stellar work. And if it takes, um, reading it 29 times, double checking it, having somebody else read it, having a mentor read it, those type things. Those are all the things that help make that report or that conversation that you're going to have with an attorney, the best you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you usually guide your mentees in price setting and
Mm.
knowing their worth and that whole
Wow, that's $1 million question, isn't it?
right?
Because, as you know, I mean, in the legal nurse consults in the world, we really don't like to talk about, even in the hospitals. I mean, you don't want to talk
Mhm.
about, I make this much, you make that much, because it might not be the same, and then there's
Yeah,
hard
it's very
feelings.
taboo.
But you do have to have a conversation. So how I guide them is, there is some things to look at. So your demographics, where you live, kind of dictates a little bit. If you're in California, you're probably going to make more than somebody in Florida. When I
Mm.
subcontracted, when I first started for California, I made more than what I made as a subcontractor in Florida. It's just the demographics of where you live. That's the first thing. Second year is experience. But if you're a nurse, been an ER nurse 5 years, or another one's been an ER 25 years, there's the experience factor. And then the third thing would be credentials. So they really are important. And I don't mean legal nurse credentials. I'll talk about that in a second, but I mean in your specialty. So if you're an OR nurse and you have that specialty, if you're an ER nurse, OB nurse, things like that, those look really good on your resume or your CV. And attorneys will take credit that she took the time to become an expert or a credentialed in her clinical setting. So if you have an opportunity to get that credentialing and you don't have it, at this point, then I would recommend that, because that does
Mm.
help boost up what you can possibly charge. Now, your LNC credentials, again, there's lots of different courses that offer certificates. The only certification program is through AALNC, and that would be the LNCC. And that's something that you would get after you've been working for a while. So I get calls all the time. How do I get my LNCC? How do I sit for that? You don't. You don't sit for it when you start. You sit for it after you've worked a few years, and that's
Mm.
what I did, because you have to have experience in order to be credentialed in that. Just like in the ER, you don't walk in the ER today and take the test tomorrow and become
Yeah.
certified. You have to work in the ER before you can sit. So it's the same type mentality. So
Yeah.
is it important to have your LNCC? I did it just because it was a thing that I wanted to do for myself, to prove that I had done the work and I know the information. But it isn't 100% necessary. You're not going to necessarily not get hired because you don't have that. They're hiring you for your clinical skill. To have it
Yeah.
is a bonus in my case. Now, I have had one subcontractor who paid more if you had your LNCC. So it does help.
And what is one piece of advice that you would give a nurse who's on the fence about becoming an LNC but might want to try it?
Well, be ready to work hard. Okay.
Mhm.
Be ready to put in for the long haul. It's not going to happen overnight. Some people, it does happen overnight, but I'm pretty sure to say most doesn't happen overnight. Be willing to ask for help. Okay. Don't think that you're going to get your first report right. You know what I mean? It's not going to go well. You're going to, I look back at reports that I did 8 years ago and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not really good, you know? So, know that you will get better in time. It does take time so I think it's just a lot of don't be hard on yourself. Don't beat yourself up if things take forever or it'll happen. It just takes time and it takes opportunity and it takes networking, all of that kind of stuff. All of that would be if you're on the fence, don't give up, just keep moving forward.
Yeah. And how would you recommend that they, start off with some level of confidence and continue to build that confidence while they're doing it? Any recommendations there?
I think the biggest way to build your confidence, one, would be talking with other LNCs, talking with other nurses that are going through what you're doing. So the networking part, whether it's on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, ALNC, LNE, education, any of those groups that are out there, this type of podcast, there's so much. There's now a book club, an LNC book club out there. So there's so many opportunities to get face to face with other LNCs and bounce ideas off of and learn from them. I do think it's just a matter of, like you said, you've got to surround yourself with people that can help you. I think that's
Yeah.
important. Whether it's other LNCs, whether it's a mentor, whether it's, a group, a community, all of that I think is so important. I mean, I'm very established in my LNC career but I go to everything. I attend every session I can find,
Yeah.
every webinar, every community because I enjoy it. I truly enjoy and I learn something every single time I go to these sessions because remember there's lots of different LNC roles. There's not just behind the scenes and expert witness. I mean, that's what you hear. There's toxic tort, there's EME or IME, there's DME, there's forensic nursing, there's in-house, there's independent, there's so many different types of work, and you don't know what they are unless you start talking with people. So just listen to people's stories.
Absolutely. And my experience, the LNC world, the whole community is amazing. Everyone's
It
so
is.
sweet to
It is.
each other, so helpful. Everyone wants to hang out and meet each other and chat, and it's great.
You're right. You're right. It is a great community. I mean, I truly think it's unique. It's unique.
Love it. And how about, is there one pivotal moment in your career that really kind of shaped your success, do you think?
If there's one pivotal moment, I think it's just kind of a building of, my first thing I got was the subcontracting. I got subcontracting and she was very tolerant. She was a good mentor at that point. She taught me as we kind of did, as we went along. And then I think the second thing I got probably was an expert witness case, which was very, very early on. I guess that would say that's probably one of the pivotal things because I never wanted to do expert witness, which is like everybody else. No, I don't think I want to do expert witness. But I had a nurse from the Orlando chapter who was adamant, Tory, if an expert witness case comes to your door, you say yes. I said, but I don't know we'll teach you, we'll help you. And so it wasn't shortly after that. And I got a call for an expert witness nursing home case. And all I could think of is this nurse saying, take it, take it, take it. So I did.
Yep.
I listened to this, the attorney. I got the records. I reviewed it and I was able to. I thought, okay, this is something that I can opine on. And, but then I was upfront with the attorney, said, never done this before. Don't know. He says, that's fine. We'll help you through that. That's not an issue. We just need you to be able to speak to what's in the chart. And they were great about helping me kind of prepare for what a deposition is and what to expect. Obviously, not my opinions. My opinions were my opinions, but they helped me understand what this form is going to be and how this attorney is going to ask you questions and stuff. So, and then I literally researched. I went to YouTube. I watched different depositions and I'm like, oh no, this is what it's going to be like. So getting my first expert witness case was pivotal. But then when it was all done and over, I was like, okay, that was not as bad as I anticipated it to be. So
Sure. Yeah.
same thing with every single phone call I've had with attorneys, a new attorney, let's say, anticipate it's going to be stressful, and they're never as bad as
Scary.
they are. So attorneys are just like everybody else. They're very eager
Yeah.
to understand. They want to learn from you. But I think as far as pivotal, it's been a building. You know, I did this and then I did a little bit of that. Then I did expert witness. Then I have my own client. So it's kind of built one thing on another.
Yeah. That's the sense that I've gotten so far as well. It's like Legos. You just kind of build it up, learn as you go. Every day I've learned more and more.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And what are the attorneys actually looking for when they're hiring the LNCs?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is your ability to communicate with them. And I mean verbally and written. So
Mm.
you need to truly be able to read the records, write a report if that's what's asked of you, but then also communicate that to the attorney to where he understands it. He understands where you're coming from, why you pointed out this is a deviation. So many times when I look at reports, the nurse will write, you know, deviation in standard of care, failed to notify the physician of a change of condition. Let's just say that. You can't stop there. You have to say, failed to notify the physician of a change of condition, and then point out what those instances were. You know what I mean? They need to know why you came to that decision and why you came to that conclusion as far as a deviation. So being able to communicate that is important. And I always go back to standard of care is what a prudent nurse or provider would do in the same or similar circumstances. So you need to be able to talk to what was done that really shouldn't have been done, or what
Mm.
was not done that should have been done. What is the normal practice for the situation? So that's all communicating. That's all communicating. And so, for example, like say you get a report that attorney asks you to write a chronology or do a chronology, and you send it off and you send it to his office. It's For me, it's not just sending that report to him. I would put in that email, I'm sending my report to you. However, I would like to jump on a call and review with you. You know,
Mm.
have that conversation, be able to explain it to him. If you don't ask for that phone call, he's probably just going to be fine reviewing your report. But I think getting that interaction and that connection is truly important. Again, that's going to help
Yeah.
get you more cases in the future, help you with your just your relationships with that attorney. So communication is probably my biggest thing that I could think of.
Yeah, makes sense. And like you said, going the extra steps, the extra
Yeah.
mile. Absolutely. Well, any other advice or insights that you would want to share with us?
Well, I kind of mentioned the one thing is just to kind of remember, be in there for the long haul. It's not going to happen overnight. It does take time, but be prepared for that, you know. So don't get discouraged when a
Mm.
door doesn't open for you, or you don't get a call back from an attorney or somebody that you sent your CV to. They are
Mhm.
very, very busy. And I'm not trying to give them excuses, but they are truly busy. And sometimes their priorities just change. Today, they're
Mm.
looking for somebody to handle this case. But tomorrow, there's a whole nother scenario that takes precedence. So you're now put on the back burner. So don't think that they're not going to call you back. I had a conversation with an attorney early on in my career, and I didn't hear from him for years later. Years later. And literally he called me, and I still work with him every day, or this every for the past like 4 years. So
Yeah.
you never know when that conversation's going to come back. So just be prepared for that. You know, I mean, and then just as far as knowing that there's the learning curve, you know, you hear
Yeah.
that there is a learning curve. My report writing was horrible when I started. I mean, it was like, because I remember my first subcontractor kept telling me, Tori, you're writing like you chart. You're not going to chart patient sleeping in bed. It's going to be the patient is asleep in the bed. You know, what I mean, you have to put in all those filler words, and we're not used to that. We're used to just as few words and abbreviations as we can do with charting. So, you know, you might have to brush up on your grammar and get some help through Grammarly or any of those programs, but know that you will have a learning curve. And so, you know, sometimes when you work for attorney or subcontractor, they'll give you a budget. They'll give you like, you know, don't spend more than 10 hours on this case, or don't, you know, something like that. You're going
Yeah.
to spend more than 10 hours when you first start. And you just have to understand that's the learning curve. But you're going
Mhm.
to get more back as you do this, and the time will shorten. It may take you 15 hours to do that 10-hour case. Next time it'll take you 14. And then eventually you do get it to where you're more efficient and can get things done in more timely. Just know that in the beginning, got to put in the time.
And the effort. Absolutely. Yeah, it won't be easy, like you said, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is. It's given me what I look for. I always say that nurses need to think about what the why is. Why are they wanting to go in? That's the first question I ask every mentor, or even when I have a discovery call. What's your why? Because everybody's why is different. Some people just, I want to be my own boss. I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm tired of the clinical bedside. My body can't do the clinical bedside anymore. Want flexibility. I want to make my own hours. There's some money, there's a million different reasons. So knowing what your why is and why you're doing it helps move you forward. And you could see the light at the end of the tunnel. My why was 100% flexibility. I was working as a director of nursing in a nursing home. I'm maybe exaggerating a little, but 80 hours a week, it seemed like, because my phone was 24 hours a day, when you're doing staffing and all of that. And I was like, I can't do this forever. And it was to the point we had just moved to Florida. My kids and family were all in Ohio. I wanted to travel more. My husband was retired and I wanted more flexibility. So that was my why, is to find something that gave me a little more flexibility. And this has done that 100%. I
Yes.
just take my computer wherever I want to, and I work from wherever I'm at. Tomorrow, leaving for Ohio. So computer's going with me.
I love it. And what was it, like a week ago you got home from
I
Cancun?
know, I know. I did not take my computer there. When I went, that was only 3 nights away, and I did not take my computer. That's probably
Very
one of the
good.
very few vacations that I didn't take my computer.
Like a real vacation. I love that for you.
But it was short, so I knew I could do what I needed to do from my phone.
Yeah. Fair.
So, yeah.
Well, it was really, really nice to have you on. You're always one of my favorites to chat with.
Well, I enjoy doing this just because, it again helps build the community. And I love what you're doing.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna say you're new to this too. You're you're making waves, you're starting chapters, you're working with AALNC, you're doing this podcast. This is amazing. So I
Thank you.
honor your efforts on this because it's not easy. It takes time. Anybody who's doing things like you're doing, people that aren't doing it, I should say, do not understand the time and effort that it takes to put in this. So I applaud you for that. And it will come
Thank
back
you.
and you'll do well. You'll do well. So
Thank you
I
so much.
appreciate being on. So if anybody ever wants to reach out to me, they're more than, I was just going to say, they're more than happy to do that. I am open to speaking with anybody. And the easiest way is probably LinkedIn. That's one way. Or they can reach out to me. My email is just palivodalegalnurse.com. Those are probably my 2 easiest ways to get a hold of me. I am going to have a website up probably for my mentorship business, probably in June. It's in
Oh,
process now.
awesome.
So once that's up and running, there'll be a way to contact me through that as well. But if anybody has any questions on LNC, AALNC, mentorship, please reach out to me.
Sounds good.